that's what the characters are saying. You're going to want to interact with the bendy parts until you find these stringy parts, and then get a really systematic way of interacting with them to produce different results, if it's release, or if it's strength, or if it's just balance. Right? So just something to consider about the meaning, the experiential meaning of some Chinese terminology. So again, as I said, the Shaolin tradition evolved this quite a bit. And there's a lot of really interesting myths about Shaolin, and I'm not going to repeat them or try and defeat them or anything like that, but if you can imagine what a bunch of meditators would have done collaboratively and collectively to find, good teachers, good environments, good support structures, so that they can actually spend more of their life in meditation. That's how all of the different early monastic traditions started. And imagine it's very much like a modern intentional community. Right? We have to live, we have to get food, grow food, buy food, beg for food, so that we can have a place to practice. And that place of practice became, in a way, a sanctuary for people who wanted to leave the world. And of course, people who wanted to leave the world were either running away from the world, which happens in monasteries, or retiring from the world to go into a place where they don't have to be in that world. So the Shaolin monastery actually became this gathering place for retired generals, healers, scholars, and it was like the intentional community based around practice that attracted all of these people with all of these amazing knowledge bases and skill bases. So retired generals would be teaching people some basic martial arts, and the Shaolin monastery was famous as a place to take people if they were really sick, because they had all these scholars and doctors and healers coming together. So in one sense, the Shaolin monastery was the first really legitimate university, of multidisciplinary people who had a lot of experience and were just there focused on training and learning and practicing. There's, again, a lot of myths about magic powers and, whether or not the guy from India sat in front of a wall for 9 years to figure out some exercises that actually don't have a form in the explicit sense. They're just a bunch of principles. So we have all this fun myth and things like that. But when I think about Shaolin, I just think about a very early intentional community that got together and invited all of these people who had a lot of knowledge and skill to share, and it all came together and eventually became a sort of pivotal place for Chan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism, or Buddhism actually was already a Zen or Chan kind of monastery. And then of course the governments decided to start paying for it, and it became this whole thing. But another funny thing about Shaolin is that they were really famous for being really good doctors, really good martial artists, really good other things. And depending on the emperor, or if the Mongols decided to show up, or other things that kind of went back and forth in China, sometimes the Shaolin monastery was in favor and sometimes it was not, and sometimes it was burned down or destroyed, or everyone was chased away. So there's been a few diasporas, or times in the history for the last 1500 years, where the monks basically just proliferated out into the world and lived as hermits or found jobs in villages and became like the originators of like half of martial arts in China. And then the monastery would be popular again, and everyone would go and rebuild the same thing again, and a couple hundred years would go by and chase the monks into the forest and over again. So that has a lot to do with what we're going to be learning. I just wanted to have that picture in your mind. Because the last really big diaspora of the Shaolin tradition, I think, was about 200 years ago. And that's where it kind of trickled down to where we're going to come from. So very quickly, I'm just going to describe the way this came to me, because that's how it's coming to you. My initial teacher in the Northern Shaolin tradition was a man named Eric Tuttle, who is, to this day, one of the most, well-known, or he likes to just do his own thing in his own way, so not a lot of people know about him, but he's easily one of the top practitioners of both, Kung Fu is more of a, I don't know, it's not really about the style, it's about how you train. He's now a lineage holder in two different internal martial arts, but when I was training with him initially about 37 years ago, we were doing Northern Shaolin, and when I first met him, I had it was like meeting a Jedi, like someone who could actually do things you couldn't do, but could show you how you could learn to do them, but he could do them. And you could stand there and physically go, okay, that's impossible, but he's doing that, and now he's showing me how to do that, and now I'm doing, okay, there's something really weird going on here. So, yeah, that was meeting people like that is a pretty interesting thing. And again, to this day, he's one of the top level people in the world for sure. And I believe he's teaching in Victoria right now, but he sometimes goes back and forth to Ontario. He studied with, I think in '68 with a man named Chan. I don't know much more about him than that because he died after a few years. But Shifu or teacher Chan, who I'd never met, had passed away, but he had a brother in the States who studied with the same teacher, and his brother was called Kwok Lam. And again, you guys don't need to know all this stuff unless you want to. And they both, Chan and Kwok Lam, both studied with a guy, Yan Shangwu, who was a pretty famous guy, who studied with a guy named Gu Zhang, who was very famous. And if you've ever seen the picture of a really skinny dude smashing a bunch of bricks with his palm in black and white, that's Gu Zhang. He's sort of a famous iron palm guy, and he studied in the Henan Mountain Shaolin lineage, which again, the monks were forced out of the monastery. They lived in the mountains as hermits, and that tradition of Shaolin came through him and through Yan Shangwu, and then through Chan and Kwok Lam, and then to Eric, and then to me, and in some cases now to you. Yeah, Kwok Lam's an interesting guy because after Chan died, Eric had to go to the States to train with him back and forth for a few years to finish his training in Shaolin. And Kwok Lam is an interesting guy if you look him up. He's like the first Northern Shaolin teacher to teach openly in the West and to make videos, back when videos were like big videos and stuff, and to try and really promote the art. And at one point ended up being a part of a lion dancing, not line dancing, but lion dancing, you know, the Chinese thing with the big lion head that you run around and do stuff. And we were actually using Kwok Lam, who became Eric's teacher for a while, had sent us a video on how to do lion dancing, and we were in this place in Ontario. And we actually ended up spending a few months traveling around doing lion dances for demonstrations and stuff. But yeah, Master Lam is famous if you ever look him up for producing something like 200 instructional videos back in the 90s or something. Interesting guy for sure. But for those people who are interested in how this comes to you, that's how it comes to you. The diaspora of Shaolin, Gu Zhang, Yan Shangwu, mostly Kwok Lam, I think, and then Eric, and then to me. And if you've ever, yeah, you'll see how deep this goes in the next few months, and you'll be like, okay, this is definitely coming from where those guys are coming from. I've had a few other teachers in the Yi Jin Jing practice over the years, but for most people, Yi Jin Jing is a series of principles. The actual forms you use or the specific exercises you use is kind of up to the martial art you're doing or the teacher you have. In fact, when I was doing this initially with Eric, he taught the initial sequence of principles through what's called the Badwan Jin, or the pieces of brocade, and then taught the other forms we'll be learning about. So just for those of you who are trying to decide what is the Yi Jin Jing, it is a series of incremental interactive principles of contraction and release that help regulate many aspects of your physical health, your ability to conduct qi through the systems of the body, and for martial artists, your ability to actually do incredible feats of speed, agility, and strength without becoming really physically big, which is, again, when you meet Jedis, you're like, there's no way that guy could do that, and this little green guy this big or something, and you're like, ah! So, yeah, size doesn't really matter. Some teachers I've had with Yi Jin Jing were much more, very, very much more focused on the Taoist alchemic practice of refining the body as a kind of alchemic laboratory, and the more you refine your tissue into what's called true soil, which we'll talk about more in a bit, the more you can reverse the pattern of aging in a way, or slow it down would probably be more accurate. And hopefully within the next 45 minutes or so, you'll go, oh yeah, that's the way that actually would work. Yeah, and a bunch of other people. I guess I spend a lot of time, anytime I meet teachers, or when you're in the professional martial arts community, you end up meeting a lot of teachers who teach their own students, who are studying with your teacher, but you're all teachers too. So I've probably talked to maybe 20 or 30 different people who weren't my teachers, but they were teaching something else, or something similar, and hearing their take on the practice and what they learned or how they do it has informed me quite a bit. So I would say about 80% of what we're doing is Eric Tuttle stuff, and then there's about a 3%, 5%, 2%, 3% from different people, and then there's my take on it from playing with this for 36 years now. Not obsessively, but with a lot of curiosity. Okay, so we're going to do something a little bit active for a minute, and then learn a little bit more about the perspective of this.